This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I welcome back two guests, David Cohn and Kris Drew, and it is the biggest episode ever of the Baseline Podcast. We break down the game between Michigan and Ohio State. We get the Michigan perspective from David Cohn and the Ohio State perspective from Kris Drew, and then we sum it all up together, and it's going to be a great ride. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast, episode 66. And it's the week of the game. And of course, that means we're not going to have one, but we're having two guests this week. And it's going to be a crazy episode. We have the one and only David Cohn from the Crain company back with us. The better of the three. I don't know. I say that with everyone, but I don't know. But he is back with us. We'll have Kris Drew later on in the show. So David, welcome back. And I'm glad you're here with us.
Fellas, I'm pumped to be here. Thanks for having me back. Let's make episode 66 the greatest episode in the history of this show.
That's the plan, man.
That's the plan.
Everything we got planned, this is the game. There's no other rivalry in college football called the game. You got your Iron Bowl, you got your Egg Bowl, like your Civil War, your Red River Shootout, but everybody knows what the game is.
Yes.
So we got big plans for that today, and big guests, including yourself, sir. So thank you for coming on. I know when you joined us initially, you were talking about coming back, so I'm glad we were able to make this happen. You had high expectations for Michigan this season, a little bit maybe higher than what we had and what our other guests have had. So now that Michigan's undefeated at this point in the season, David, describe what it's been like being a Michigan fan watching these games these last several weeks.
Yeah, 11-0. I mean, you don't just luck your way to winning 11 straight games. Looks like we're going to have an undefeated Michigan and Ohio matchup for the first time since 2006, which was my freshman year. I got to be a part of that unbelievable run. Look, it's the best. Thank you. I don't even. Wow. All right. Interview over now. I'm just going to go away. But no, seriously. I mean, it's the best week of the year, boys. I mean, we got Thanksgiving Thursday, my mom's birthday Friday, Michigan, Ohio Saturday. I mean, what else do you want for a week? So as far as Michigan's season, yeah, I mean 11-0, but again, everything comes down to this week. Beat Ohio or you can't accomplish anything else. I said this last year when we were looking at Jim Harbaugh losing, what was it, 7 straight? Yeah. And I said, look, everything you want goes through Ohio. Unless you beat the Buckeyes, you can't win the division. Unless you win the division, you can't win the conference. And unless you win the conference, you can't make it to the college football playoff. And look what happened last year. You finally beat your biggest rival. Jim Harbaugh had not beaten Urban Meyer. You finally beat your biggest rival, and all of the rest of those things happened. You won the division, you won the conference, you made the college football playoff. Now, it didn't have a completely happy ending because the Georgia Bulldogs were pretty good last season and, ran us out of there. But yeah, and then a tumultuous offseason. You're replacing both coordinators. Jim Harbaugh is again flirting with the NFL. Did he get off for the Minnesota Vikings job? Did he not? What was going to happen there? It was on signing day. You're losing Aiden Hutchinson, number 2 overall pick. You're losing Ajabo on the other end of that defensive line. Dax Hill goes to the league. There was a lot of question marks. Then all of a sudden, coming out of fall camp, it's like, well, who's going to start at quarterback? Now, I said throughout this process, it's better to have 2 really good quarterbacks, and that's why you have a quarterback controversy, than to have 2 bad quarterbacks or 2 mediocre quarterbacks, and for some reason, that's why you have a quarterback controversy. I think Cade McNamara would have gotten the job done for us this year. J.J. McCarthy still has not played his best football game. So if you're a Michigan fan right now, and you sit here 11-0 and your starting quarterback who has all this upside ceiling still hasn't played his best football game, you have to be ecstatic. Obviously, the only thing that's putting a damper on this week is Blake Corum's health. He did come out yesterday after the first half injury. He had 1 carry in the second half there, still got 5 yards. Now I'm hearing that there's no structural damage in the knee, which is a good sign. At the same time, whenever you take a hit like that and your first instinct is to drop the football when you never fumble and reach for your knee, look, it's quite possible he doesn't play this next week. It's quite possible that he's out for the season. If you guys have heard anything, feel free to chime in and let me know, but I've at least heard that there's no structural damage.
I haven't heard anything either, but I was just thinking like, okay, if Blake can't play, I know Donovan Edwards has been banged up too, and he didn't play Saturday either. So that running back position could be really big thing, big issue for a team that likes to run first.
It's interesting. It's interesting too, David, because Ohio State's going through the same struggles because, you had Mayan Williams, who had a heck of a game last week against Indiana. goes out after the first half at 15 carries, 147 yards. And then this week, TreVeyon Henderson, we were told was good to go, which that's more of TreVeyon Henderson saying, hey, I'm tired of sitting on the bench. I want to play. And we saw that he wasn't healthy. Dallin Hayden, by the way, has secretly the last like 3 games ran for 100 yards apiece, which I just think is funny. And we have Xavier Johnson, who's a wide receiver, being the backup. So it'd be really funny to see a Ohio State Michigan game and to see like maybe the 3rd string running backs when everyone was talking about.
I was just thinking about it. I was just thinking
nuts.
about that before I came on. We may see a situation where 2 undefeated teams with a chance to go to the conference championship and go to the college football playoff are both starting their 3rd string running backs. And if that happens, you have to give the edge to the Buckeyes in that case. I mean, you're talking about Dallin Hayden. All he did as a true freshman was come in yesterday and go for what, 146, 3 touchdowns, something like that. So I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, that Michigan is one Blake Corum injury away from being, an above average good football team, not an 11-0 football team. And some people pushed back and said, well, with this offensive line, there's a number of great running backs that could run behind this line of scrimmage. I think you saw yesterday against Illinois that is not necessarily the case. Now, with Donovan Edwards out too, Michigan's backup running back, sure, I think he could have stepped in and had a little bit more success. But I think there was there was a little bit of panic in that game against Illinois when Blake Corum went out, not only because he's such a great player, but he's the leader of the team. That's the heart and soul of your team. And that's your identity. Now, before the season, I didn't think Blake Corum would be in the Heisman conversation in week 11. I didn't think that he would come in and just, be able to replace Hassan Haskins so easily, but he is truly an incredible running back. And that's the identity of this team, is to run first. So if Michigan's down to a 3rd string running back and Ohio's down to a 3rd string running back, I think the Buckeyes would certainly like their chances in that.
Yeah,
that is true. I would like my chances.
Yeah.
Hey, one other thing too, David, we were wondering if Michigan and Ohio State might be looking ahead this weekend. And I mean, both kind of struggled. Ohio State for the most of the Maryland game. Michigan, I mean, you could chop that up to Blake Corum being out, but Illinois gave him a heck of a game. And I think one thing people were forgetting too is like Illinois still has a lot to play for this year. They want to make that Big Ten championship game out in the West. And I mean, I'm not surprised that they gave Michigan everything that they could handle. But one other thing too is Illinois' pass D. I mean, it looked kind of legit. You mentioned JJ not playing his best football, whether that's just him being inaccurate at times, or maybe his receivers not helping him out a little bit. Did the Michigan pass game give you anything you liked yesterday in the absence of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards?
No, but let me get to the first question first.
Sure.
As it relates to looking past Illinois and Maryland, respectively, for these 2 teams, as intense as the Wolverines and Buckeyes rivalry is, and this week is just different, guys. Like it was different in the locker room every day that you go in there as a player. It's going to be different for me. You're calling me old. I'm 15 years removed from that freshman year and a good 12 years removed from my senior year. I'm going to have trouble sleeping this week. That's how much that rivalry means. So when you have a rivalry that's that intense and you could meet undefeated for the first time in 16 years,
16
yes. Yes, it's of course it's easy to look past a game and you have a trap situation the week before. But, and we talked about this, we dedicated an entire episode last week talking about these trap games. And I said, neither of these teams should be looking past their opponents. And you can tell an 18 to 22-year-old kid how good Illinois is and how they are on the cusp of winning the Big Ten West. Or you can tell you can show footage of Mike Loxley's offense and young Talua Tagovailoa and how lethal they can be to a Buckeyes team. You can do all that, but still it is easy to look past these opponents. At the same time, I just want to say I felt like watching both football games. I felt like that Maryland and Illinois came in there and just played great football.
Yes.
It didn't seem like a situation to me where, it was so sloppy on one side, or, this team looked like they were looking past. I mean, Illinois came in and punched Michigan in the face other than that first drive. And then Jake asked me today on our college football recap, was I surprised to see what Maryland was able to do in the pass game against the Buckeyes? I said, no, I watched them do it for the entire Michigan game, except the very, very beginning and the very, very end. Michigan beat Maryland at the beginning of the game and the end of the game. All in the middle there, Maryland played great football, and there was a lot of Buckeyes fans laughing. Michigan only beat Maryland by 7 points. This is a 3-point game yesterday. 3-point game yesterday with 40 seconds to go. But I will say this about the Buckeyes: 3-point game with 40-something seconds. They still find a way to win by double digits, like they have every game this season. Ben, that is an incredible stat, my friend.
I'll say this. What I was most impressed by was so I heard this the podcast. It's a High State podcast. They interviewed Harrison after the game because he had those 2 sacks at the end of the game. One caused a fumble that wouldn't be a touchdown. And they said, "Hey, how'd you get to the quarterback with a 3-man rush?" And he said, "JT looked at me and said, 'You get a sack, the game's over.'" And he said, "Okay, I'm gonna get 2." So I mean, like, you know, it's so crazy with this. I'll be honest with you, David. It's so frustrating as a High State fan. I'm sure as a Michigan fan, it can be that way too. But especially when I love how Ohio State decided to go zone coverage pretty much the whole game when they were just running outs and ins the whole game. And I'm sitting there going, "Hello, Jim Knowles, I know we paid you a lot of money, but we got to change something up." And I think that's what. But I do agree with you, because even when I played sports, right, and you see this next game that is so intense, and it's a game that just will give you nightmares if you lose or whatever. And especially some of these players that have played in it, they look past the game they're at. I think it's natural to be like, "Hey, I can't wait for this big game." But we forget that Maryland, when they're healthy, they're one of the best teams in the Big Ten. When Illinois is running the ball, I'm sorry, there's no one's going to stop them running the ball.
No.
And so I think that's what's crazy.
Yeah, and as far as Mike Locksley in Maryland goes, you don't just become the OC at Alabama unless you're an incredible football coach, and the job that he's doing with that program. And then on the Illinois side, I mean, they have the leading rusher in the country. Yeah. You know, so I don't know. I didn't get a sense that the players on the field were looking past these games, as frustrating as it was sometimes to watch some of the things that were going on with Michigan. I'll tell you what, I was starting to question whether maybe some of the coaching staff was looking past the game more than the players were. That's the question that I had. Now, I don't know all the details on why all of Michigan's best players were out against Illinois yesterday. I don't have that inside information. I don't know if Mike Morris, is going to play against the Buckeyes. I don't know about our starting tight end or Donovan Edwards, or what the situation is leading into this rivalry week as we approach it. I just know that it did feel like a little bit more from the coaching staff than even the players. We thought that we could just show up and win a football game. Yeah. But at the end of the day, both took care of business, both won games. And as far as I'll say one more thing about the conferences, and this is something that I talk about with Jake and Blaine, my co-host, a lot, which is when Georgia goes on the road at Missouri and almost loses a game, or, we see Tennessee go on the road at South Carolina and get 63 hung up on them. We have this tendency to say, well, that's the SEC, any given week in the Southeastern Conference, and you can go lose a game. But then when the Buckeyes go on the road against Maryland and almost lose, or you have a situation with Illinois coming into the big house, then we say, well, those teams aren't elite, and that's just a problem to me. Like, we need to stop. There's great football being played all around the country right now. If you look at the trajectory and the step that the Pac-12 has made, being on the West Coast out there, they were more affected by COVID policy than most of the schools in the country. Some of those programs weren't even playing football. What the Pac-12 has done this year has been incredible. So you can take different teams from each of these conferences around the country, and you're going to get great football, and you can lose on any given Saturday.
That's what I love about football.
I'm kind of with you too, David. Like, maybe they did look ahead, Ohio State and Michigan, we don't know. But across the country, we saw Kentucky give it to Georgia. Like, maybe Kentucky doesn't have anything to play for, but they can play spoiler to Georgia. We saw Ole Miss lose. We saw North Carolina lose to Georgia Tech. We saw, like you just said, Tennessee with South Carolina. So there was just a lot of, I guess, teams that maybe didn't have something to play for other than spoiler. And even Baylor, TCU, that went right down to the final play there. But
down to the final play, USC, UCLA,
right? That one too.
It was just fantastic football across the country. To answer your second question quickly, you were talking about Michigan's pass game, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Was there anything there that you liked or thought?
Not really. Not really. I mean, when you needed a 4th down conversion through the air to go win the football game, and you complete that pass, then yes. I mean, that's everything's on the table right now. An undefeated season, you complete that pass and you go win the game. So yes, there is that. I'll give that the kudos that it deserves. But other than that, Not really. I mean, I'm seeing, JJ McCarthy cannot be this inaccurate with the football down the field. Okay. But that's just one facet of it. The other part of it is a big reason why JJ McCarthy is the starting quarterback at Michigan right now and not Cade McNamara is because of his mobility and because of all that upside that he has on the run. We need to be getting him dialed up in the run game more, not only with designed runs, and obviously he's going to scramble sometimes when he needs to, but the zone read and the RPO game is a huge part of this, because as more and more defenses start to stack that box, 8-man fronts, even 9-man fronts, and creep those safeties down, he has to be able to pull the zone read when it calls for it. And then he needs to be able to hit the slant route behind that when he pulls on the RPO game when it calls for it. Not predetermined, not premeditated pulls, not premeditated throws, but to be able to do that when the defense gives you that. So that's what I want to see is in the next iteration of JJ McCarthy's game, and I hope that it comes in exactly 6 days from now. But if not, look, he's still a young quarterback. I think the ceiling is very, very, very high. He's going to be a phenomenal player, and like I said, you sit here right now, if you're Michigan, 11-0, and your quarterback still hasn't had one of those games where you say, wow, he's an all-pro.
Mm-hmm. Looking at Ohio State, David, what's something about their team that you see that Michigan might be able to take advantage of this weekend? And then what's something about Ohio State that just scares you that could be a problem for Michigan?
Well, as far as what scares me, I mean, anytime you line up against the Buckeyes and you look at that wide receiving core, I mean, it's jaw dropping. I don't know how you send 2 guys to the NFL in the top 11 picks. Is that what I mean? I was sitting here watching Red Zone before I came on here. Was it Garrett Wilson 10, Chris Olave 11 back to back? And people asked me, you had 6 wide receiver picks, I think, in the first 18 in the NFL draft, and people said, well, which wide receiver is going to be the best in their rookie year? I said Chris Olave. I'm going to take Chris Olave. And right now he's averaging 70 yards a game, something like that as a rookie. I don't know how you lose both of those guys.
And Smith and
Jigba. And then that was my point. And then the best one, supposedly, Jackson Smith-Njigba, comes back and stays, and he's not even leading the team in wide receiving. You got Marvin Harrison's kid right now. It's just like, it is a never-ending story in terms of the amount of talent that the Buckeyes are able to produce.
And Farmer Gronk.
At every position. Well, at every position, but just right now, especially that wide receiving core. And I think that Michigan is certainly very glad that they didn't catch the Buckeyes in September. Right. Or last year when they play in September. Football in the Big Ten is different in September than it is in November. And that's why Michigan and Illinois and Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin and a lot of these teams have the identity they do. Now, the Buckeyes have somehow been able to keep this sort of blue collar mentality, hard nosed defense, and we're going to run the ball downhill at you and always have a good running back, plus have an elite quarterback, plus have an elite wide receiver core. They really have separated themselves the last decade and a half in terms of their ability to do that. Having said that, what do I like about Michigan's chances against the Buckeyes? Look, it's what Michigan needs to do, which is to run the football downhill, run it, and just smash mouth right in the face, but then be able to win off of that, run to pass, win off of the play action, win off of throwing on the run, things like that. So, Steve Dace is going to come on our show this week, and he came on earlier in the year, and he said the Buckeyes still have a physicality problem. The Jim Knowles hire was a phenomenal hire, and they're going to have a really great defense. But as we sit here now, the Buckeyes still have a physicality problem. Now, I was surprised to hear him say that because I wouldn't go that far. Now, this was 10 weeks ago, right? This was at the beginning of the season. He said that. And even then I was thinking, man, if you heard what Ryan Day was saying after the Rose Bowl, after they beat Utah, he wasn't even celebrating a Rose Bowl victory because he was so mentally focused on having just lost to Michigan, and they want it to be November already. And that's how much this rivalry means to these two teams. I'm not going to go so far as to say that the Buckeyes have a physicality problem because I've seen this movie year after year after year. I think last year was the anomaly, but that that doesn't mean that Michigan can't have success in the run game, and they're going to need to if they expect to win this football game. And then I'm always looking at Michigan's secondary, guys. I'm always looking at it because it seems like year after year when Michigan struggles or when they lose football games, a large part of that is due to the secondary. And this defense for Michigan has gotten better every single week. I've been so proud to watch this defense's growth throughout the year. And we've been winning in the second half of ball games. That's something new for the Jim Harbaugh era. They've gone into the locker room, they've made adjustments. And until yesterday's game, Michigan had won the second half of games like 117-3, something like that. So that's really incredible. But in the secondary, I know Will Johnson is a young kid, and it's not really fair to go ask a true freshman 11 weeks into his college career, hey, you're going to have to go line up against Marvin Harrison Jr. and some of these guys the Buckeyes have. But there's a reason they put 5 stars by your name, so you got to go figure out a way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. The physicality thing, I think Ohio State has improved, like especially at the linebacker position and defensively, but offensively, I'll let Ben address this. The offensive line these last few games has been kind of iffy, especially with the running game. And I mean, I know Ohio State's had the injuries at running back too, but it just is like, why can't they seem to, like, especially in the Northwestern game, even without the pass game, why can't they move these like 2-star defensive linemen at Northwestern around when you're all 5 stars?
Well, it's even frustrating too, because, and David, it was actually, I just told Josh before we got on here, Matt Jones got hurt at the end of the game yesterday, and he's been kind of like the weak link. He's been injured. He's kind of been the thing. And some of Ohio State fans I was seeing say, oh, he got hurt. Oh man, that sucks. And kind of like roll their eyes, because I think that's it's one of those things where guard has been the issue for Ohio State. Because at Ohio State, for some reason, Ryan Day loves to run the off tackle, zone read it all the way outside. And that's great. But the issue is if you don't have athletic linemen, that can get out and get going, it's not going to work. When did Ohio State have success the last 2 weeks was when they said, okay, we're going to line up, we're going to jam it down your throat. And that's what works for Ohio State. And you're seeing that with Weipler up front and with Jackson and with the 2 tackles. And even when Jones is playing well, it's going forward, not sideways. And I think that's what I'm interested to see if they can do that against Michigan, because if they can get that downward game, then the play action pass, which is what Ohio State is very, very good at, opens up. And that's when you're going to see Harrison or Mbuka break open down the field, because you're going to have those safeties creeping up. And that's when Ohio State attacks.
Yeah, and for Michigan, can you limit those big plays? That's been the thing that I've seen year after year. When I tell you that I've seen this movie, the movie I'm talking about is Ezekiel Elliott running from the 50 into the end zone, Beanie Wells running from the 50 into the end zone. The Buckeyes don't only create explosive plays through the air. They do a lot through the running game, and I've seen it a lot. Can you limit those explosive plays? Because I haven't seen Michigan play from behind a lot this year, and that's great, and that's part of the identity we talk about. When you run the ball so much and so effectively, you chew up a lot of clock. You're going to get fewer possessions, and you're going to keep the other team from getting so many possessions. You're going to keep a high-powered offense over there on the sidelines. So to be able to do that, Michigan's offense needs to stay out of 3rd and long. Okay, stay in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, so you can pick up those first downs in the run game. And then you need to be able to keep from getting down too much. Michigan's been able to play from a score back, and I think this will certainly be a close game. And whoever has the ball last will most likely win it. But you don't want to see a situation where you're down 14 by 14 early in the first half, because we haven't really seen Michigan be able to create those explosive plays. See, if Michigan finds himself up 14 late in the second half, no Michigan fan is going to say, well, this thing's put away, because we've seen the Buckeyes be able to score. What was the score with 6 minutes left against Penn State? It was essentially, what was it, tied? Maybe Ohio State was
we were up 1, I think, or down 1 or something like that. It was
up 1
like
or down 1, something
You're
like
down
that.
going
exactly.
into the 4th. That's all I remember.
Yeah, down going into the 4th with 6 minutes left in the game. I think they were up 1 or 2, something like that. All of a sudden, the Buckeyes reel off all these points. They end up winning again by double digits against Maryland. We saw with 40 seconds left, you're up 3, win by double digits. So we know the Buckeyes can do it. There's going to be no lead that's safe. But for Michigan, you can't get down early. You can't get down big early anyway, is what I mean to say. You can't get down big early, because we haven't seen Michigan be able to create those explosive plays on the offensive side of the ball to be able to fight from 2 or 3 scores back.
Yeah, that's interesting, David. Michigan, I agree with you. They've struggled to make those big plays. They're kind of like, they'll slowly break you down. Like they'll get these 6 to 8 yard chunks, but I believe Ohio State is first in second half scoring. I think Michigan's right behind him in second for second half scoring. So I think either side, like you can't get into a 1-2 score deficit just because most likely your opponent's going to be putting up the points in the second half. And it's like, I think this might actually be a game where you win it in the first half, as weird as that sounds. I agree with you. Whoever has at the end is probably going to be in the best position to win it. But I think whoever maybe has the better first half could dictate this victory as well.
That's interesting to hear. I will be paying special attention to the weather this week to see if that holds. If the weather is really bad,
No wind,
then you
please.
might be right. Yeah, but I mean, for both teams here, any Michigan fan who's obviously Michigan fans are praying for tough conditions and hoping that it snows and sub-freezing conditions and all that, because that helps with their identity. I mean, I'm a big tennis fan too, so anytime I would see Rafael Nadal on the court, he's just the type of player who wants to play in the conditions. He's built for that. So whenever they would close the roof in a building, they would always talk about how Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic benefit from that. Nadal wants to play outside with the roof open. I understand why Michigan fans want that, but at the same time, I don't think that will be the deciding factor. Look, CJ Stroud and the Buckeyes, they're going to score points. I don't care what the weather is like. And you have to go into this with a mindset, if you're Michigan, that you have to be able to win in multiple ways. I think the Buckeyes need to think that too. Whatever the game, Kirby Smart's doing such a good job at this at Georgia right now, understanding the tone of a football game early and then saying, okay, we'll win that type of game. We need to get into a shootout. We'll figure out a way to win that. We need to get in a defensive battle on the road at Kentucky. We'll win 16-6. We don't care. So understand, no matter what the weather is, no matter who's in for you, no matter who's out for you, this is the type of game where you need to go in and you need to find a way to beat your biggest rival. And that's a statement that could be made every year these teams play, right? That's a statement that could be made if both of them have 4 losses each. Now, everything is even more on the table because you have a chance to go to the conference championship. You have a chance to go to the college football playoff, and everything that was on the table last season I talked about is on the table this season. Plus the Heisman Trophy could be on the table, boys. I mean, the winner of this football game could walk away with the Heisman Trophy and everything else we talked about. Again, I don't know what Blake Corum's status is. If he doesn't play, he won't win the Heisman Trophy. If he does play and he rushes for 30 yards, he won't win the Heisman Trophy. I don't think CJ Stroud is at the very top of the list right now after a couple of his performances, but it's not impossible that the winner of this game, if either one of those stars on both sides shines for their team and gets a victory, they could walk away with the trophy most assuredly.
That was actually a question we got from a listener: is does an Ohio State victory in this game guarantee Stroud the Heisman? Does a Michigan victory guarantee Corum the Heisman? And
Ben, what do you think?
I've said this. I've said CJ Stroud to me has always been at this is what I've said. I actually said this before the show. I said CJ Stroud has benefited from guys right behind him or right at the tier of him struggling, right? When CJ Stroud had that 70-yard passing game, Hendon Hooker was awful, right? And it kind of slowed him down. This week, he throws for 220, 230, a touchdown, manages the game well, but Drake May had a terrible game. Hendon Hooker got hurt, did not have a good game. And so I felt like this would be the capstone. I think if he gets a win here, and let's say he throws for 250, 4 touchdowns, or 304 touchdowns, or manages the game well and makes some plays with his feet or whatever, then that's the cap that he needs, maybe plus a Big Ten championship game, right? But I think the same for Corum. Like, I think if Corum puts out some crazy numbers against Ohio State and Michigan wins by 2 scores or whatever, then yeah, I think that is. But I think really for Stroud, you have to put the numbers up in this game and the win. Like, he can get the win, but if his numbers are like, okay, you're not showing up against a really good defense, then that's where everyone's going to judge. But I think it really goes back to everyone else hasn't been performing. So Stroud's been able to just hang on the top spot or near the top because no one else is performing well.
Well, let's talk about what we know right now. Hendon Hooker losing at South Carolina. I don't think Hendon Hooker is going to win the Heisman Trophy now.
Yeah.
Drake May losing against Georgia Tech. Look, Drake May's claim for the Heisman Trophy was never about being on the best team.
Yeah.
Right.
It
all
was
about the
never
numbers.
about like we're certainly going to make the college football playoff, but it was about not losing in so many games to keep you out of it. We saw Robert Griffin III win the trophy with 3 losses. Losing against Georgia Tech yesterday, I think North Carolina was at home as well and throwing for 202. I
that is
feel
a
like
bad loss.
I feel like he's out of the conversation now, even though he will play the two toughest defenses he's faced this season in North Carolina State and Clemson back to back. If he were to go and really shine in both those games and he's a 2-loss ACC champion, I don't think he's out of it the way Hendon Hooker is out of it right now. But Drake May is no longer at the top of my board. Hendon Hooker is no longer at the top of my board. The problem with CJ Stroud for me, and you guys tell me what you think, it's difficult for me to say he's leading the Heisman Trophy race and could win it with a win this weekend when he's had a worse year than last year. Right. I mean, last year he had this otherworldly season, barely to me gets beat out by Bryce Young, who does the exact same thing, but goes to the national championship as well. It's difficult to give a guy the Heisman Trophy when he didn't win it and did worse than he did the previous season, even though I don't think CJ Stroud is out of it because his team is undefeated right now and he still has his biggest rival ahead of him. And if he beats them, he's going to play in a conference championship, which Hendon Hooker and Drake May Hendon Hooker's not going to do. Drake May will play in his conference championship, but he's going to play against Clemson. And then right now, I feel like, on the other side, Blake Corum, on the other hand, is banged up. Who knows if he's even going to play in this game, but still against Illinois, only plays a quarter and a half, still has over 100 rushing yards and a touchdown. So that didn't knock him out of it for sure. But right now, I really feel like Caleb Williams to me is leading the Heisman race. I think he's leading the Heisman race right now. And just like we said about Drake May, Caleb Williams is going to have his opportunities. He's going to play Notre Dame at home. And this is a Notre Dame team that's been getting better every single week since that Marshall loss, and he's probably going to get Oregon. I mean, no matter who he plays in the conference championship, they're going to be a great team. You're probably going to get Oregon. He could potentially get, if it was a rematch against UCLA, we saw what he just did in that game, so either way, that's who I have leading right now. But Tom Luganbill made a good point when he came on our show last week. It's tougher for some of these guys on the West Coast to win the Heisman Trophy because they're not playing in primetime games. A lot of them are playing after the East Coast has already gone to sleep, and it's difficult to win the Heisman Trophy just off the Sunday stat sheet.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'll say, CJ, that is a good point about not having as good of a season as last year. And I think there's been times where CJ's been inconsistent. Maybe he finishes with a solid stat line, but there was maybe 2 quarters or like a quarter and a half stretch in the game, like against Iowa, where he just wasn't good. Penn State, he wasn't really good. But when you read the final numbers, it's like, I guess he had a solid day overall. But like Ben said, too, I feel like when CJ has had these bad games, the rest of the field has had bad games as well. And I kind of been off on Caleb, like at least early in the season, people were talking about Caleb Williams, but he struggled against Oregon State. I think he struggled. Maybe it was against Arizona. I can't remember. But these last couple of games, I mean, he's quietly moving up the ranks. I think he had 5 or 6 touchdowns in that UCLA game. Still, I think only 2 picks. He has his best games ahead of him, like you said, with Notre Dame. Probably will play Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. Maybe even be a playoff team at the end of the day. But yeah, I think Caleb Williams has kind of quietly fought his way back into this. And then you kind of got these other guys like Bo Nix and Max Duggan that are just maybe just on the outside looking in. But I guess to me, CJ, the team success helps. But I think also when he's had bad games, the rest of the field has had bad games as well.
I even said too, David, that when he had that bad game in Northwestern, he answered a question that we didn't see before. He answered the question of being tough and running the ball, which is something that I think for me is what kept him after that game. I didn't drop him because I said that's a question that he has answered that no one really thought he was going to do ever. Like everyone thought he's just never going to run the ball. And I think answering that question, I think kept me going, okay, he'll stay up there. But I do agree that Caleb Williams is up there. And I think it's going to come down to, I believe, CJ Stroud. If let's say Ohio State wins this weekend, it'll be between CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams the last couple of games. Who has the better numbers? Who has the better wins? And at the end of the day, that's who it's going to be between. But again, it seems like it's like the Bryce Young situation. It might not be in like Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud wins by 12 votes or like something crazy like that where it's so tight, it's going to go either way.
I feel like
there's
CJ,
another name. There's another name, Bryce Young, the
Another-
defending
Yeah.
champion. I mean, he's not completely out of this thing right now. Again, it's not only tough to win the trophy, it's especially tough to go back to back. And Bryce hasn't had as good of a season as he had last year, and has multiple losses to go with it. It's just everything you're saying is right, and you don't have to be perfect to win the Heisman
Yeah.
Trophy. No one can play perfect. So as difficult as it will be to watch someone hoist the Heisman Trophy, he only threw 70 yards against Northwestern. You can say that's what the game dictated, and I have the wins to go with it, and I have the numbers in other games to go with it. It's just I saw what Dwayne Haskins did that year. Okay, his last year. Incredible performance, and he was my Heisman Trophy leader that year and didn't win it. And then to see what Justin Fields did with the touchdown to interception ratio, he had like 45-2 or something ridiculous, and he didn't come away with the trophy. And then even CJ Stroud last year, 4,400 yards, something like that, 44 touchdowns, 6 picks. Here he's sitting here going into this game, 2,900 yards. He does have fewer interceptions at 4 and 34 touchdowns. I mean, it's not that long ago, guys, that 2,900 yards, 36 touchdowns and 4 interceptions or something would give you the Heisman Trophy walking away. It's just, it's a different game now. So yeah, I think he's still right there in the mix. And just like everything in the season right now, it's coming down to the last week.
Yeah, man.
Speaking of the last week, Josh, do we have a prediction coming up here?
Yeah, I think it's about that time now where we all make a game prediction. I think right now Ohio State is like a 7 or 7.5 point favorite, which might just be because they're the home team. Home field advantage in this game is pretty important. We saw what it did for Michigan last year, especially being the veteran team that they were. Ben, I'll start with you because I don't know my prediction yet. I'll think about it a little bit more. Maybe you could sway me a little bit.
Yes. This is my thoughts. I think it's going to be a 2-score game either way. That's just my thoughts on the top of it. I think being at home is going to help Ohio State huge. I think the crowd's going to be nuts. I have friends that are going to the game. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be a great atmosphere, like it always is. This is what I say. I don't know who's healthy for the Ohio State in the running backs, and also Lathan Ransom. Eichenberg basically has 2 broken hands. Lathan Ransom has a broken thumb. A couple of the D linemen are banged up. So there's quite a few guys that are banged up for Ohio State. And so my thought is, at the end of the time, I think Ohio State wins this game. I'm going to say 38-28. So I think Ohio State
28.
Yes. I think it's going to be one of those games that, again, it could be complete opposite. It could be like 17-10. But I just think with the high power offense of Ohio State and the running game of Michigan is going to come out with some points early on, maybe late on. I don't know, but I'm going to go 38-28. Ohio State comes out on top and books their ticket to Indy for the Big Ten championship game. David?
You're close, but you got the score wrong and the winning team wrong. So look, here's what's going to happen. I got to ride with the Wolverines this week. I don't care. I got to get the jerseys and the Letterman jacket on. I say Jake Moody kicks 3 field goals on top of whatever else happens. Maybe Blake Corum, let's hope, goes not only into the football game, but rushes for, let's say, 165, couple touchdowns, 30-27 Wolverines.
Oh, Josh.
I think my prediction is kind of relying on at least one of those Michigan running backs to be healthy, right? Either Donovan Edwards needs to play or both of them ideally. But
Josh,
I'm giving Ohio State the edge here, but by less than a score. I think it's going to be something along the lines of 37-33. We've seen Ohio State's offense have no problem getting to the red zone before, but against good defenses, we've seen them have to kick some field goals. So I think Ohio State, Ruggles is going to have to be kicking. Moody's going to have to be kicking. But I'm going to give Ohio State the edge simply because they're the home team here and say it's going to be 37-34.
David,
right.
We want to just say, first off, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining the Baseline Podcast.
You
always are welcome. You're always are welcome.
Thank you, sir.
And we hope for a big game this week. I know I'll be messaging you, David, because I got to a little chirping a little bit, But anyways, David, thank you so much for coming on, and hopefully you'll be back soon for another edition of the Baseline Podcast.
Let's do that. Thank you, boys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, well, we want to say thank you so much for David. I know you guys watched that. For us, it was a while ago, but we're still going to break it down for you. Josh, what did you think of what David had to say here as we broke down the Michigan Ohio State game?
I mean, I love hearing from David, being a former player, actually being a part of the rivalry in house, as a quarterback for Michigan. So I always love hearing that perspective. And even still, like, not being removed from Michigan for, as long as he's been, he still has trouble through the week, getting to sleep, not necessarily going through nightmares, but just like it's still kind of like weighs on him.
Yeah, it was fascinating too, Josh, because it was like he wasn't like the obnoxious like fandom, right? Like he was very realistic. Like, okay, these are the things that Michigan struggles with. Here's the things that Ohio State are really good at. Here's the things that Ohio State aren't good at. Here's what Michigan's really good at. And he thinks it's gonna be a close game. I mean, you saw it. He thinks it's gonna be a 3-point game. So for me, it was really awesome to see. And once again, we're so thankful for David to take time and spend time with us for 30 minutes. It's a blessing. But yeah, I think all what he said was very legit, and some things that I think caught a lot of both of us kind of off guard. Even when he said, like, he thinks Caleb Williams is the Heisman favorite right now, and a lot of other things. But it's awesome to hear a former player's perspective in all these kind of senses when it comes to college football.
Right. Yeah. And also just being, I guess, on the Michigan side of things, like me being in Ohio, I mean, I'm not an Ohio State fan, but I'm friends with a lot of Ohio State fans. So I feel like you and me can be very easily trapped in like that Ohio State bubble. So it's nice to kind of see what I guess people outside bubble think of both teams as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because we can't get trapped in that bubble, and I think it's very important that we continue to focus on the game as a whole, because you're trying to see both the pros and cons for both teams. And I think at the end of the day, that's what David gave us, and so we really appreciate for David and what he gave to us. But we're not just having David on today, Josh. We have another guest coming right up now. This was obviously pre-recorded, but you will see, you'll hear and see from Kris and hear his thoughts on what he thinks the Ohio State Michigan game will be like, and the challenges that he thinks that Ohio State and Michigan might give each other in this game. So let's give it away to future Ben and Kris. Hey everyone, we are back with another interview this week. I said we were not just going to bring one this week. I said two, and so we deliver. That's what we do on this show. We deliver in episode 66, which is going to be the greatest episode of all time because it's the game week. And we have the one and only, the most famous man in Cleveland that I know, Kris Drew. That's who it is. No, Kris Drew is back with us. Kris, how you doing, man? Welcome back.
Oh, I'm lovely. It's hate week. It's rivalry week. I mean, across college football, all the top 5 teams struggled, and here we are because it's that time of the year. I know I'm excited, Ben. I'm super geeking about kind of getting into this. I've had some thoughts about this. Now I have anxiety about this game, and I'm ready to talk my way through it. It's like, so like you called me like a guest or like this interview, but for me, this is like therapy. I'm like talking to my 2 therapists. I'm going to give you like all my worries, all my fears, and you're going to help me work through them. So thank you both.
All right.
Hey, of course.
Well, first things first, Kris, how many times have you listened to It's Time for War so far?
Only twice. I let's do it, and then I had to watch Pac-12 After Dark last night.
I did too, man. That was nuts.
It was nuts. Always delivers. They always deliver.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, it was in the morning for me. Technically, it was like 6 a.m. for me in the morning. So
Pac-12 for breakfast.
Yeah, it's Pac-12 in the morning.
Pac-12 before sun.
Before sun.
Yeah. So, Kris, we had you on preseason to talk college football with us. I believe you had 3 Buckeyes in the Heisman finalists, and we did predict correctly that Ohio State would be undefeated at this point. But I don't think the season went exactly how you, Ben, and I thought it would. Yeah. So I guess a little bit of compare and contrast here. What has been different to you than what you thought you'd see?
From Ohio State or my overall predictions? Because remember,
from
I
Ohio
also
State. Just from Ohio State.
I had NC State in my top 5 as well.
Yeah, we did. We don't talk about the NC State because I was in that camp in Utah. And,
I was not.
It was so fun to fall down the trap. But for this Ohio State team, a couple things. I'm surprised that Travion Henderson regressed. That one's really shocked me. I know a lot of people want to reference the injury, the foot injury. But the more I think about it, like, your feet and eyes, like, just because you injured your foot doesn't mean you're blind in one eye.
Yeah.
So the Travion Henderson thing, it really surprised me. Obviously, I did not see the JSN injury thing coming, because I still think he would have been a Heisman finalist if he was healthy, because I think he would have probably outpaced Marv at this point, and Marv has got enough buzz as kind of like the nation's best player, regardless of position, in my opinion. Additionally, I have been A little bit disappointed in the corners. I thought they would be a little bit better. I thought, with another year, I thought Denzel Burke would kind of step up. What I'm surprised with, though, is Cade Stover. Cade Stover's really wowed me.
Farmer Gronk. My dad
Farmer
calls him.
Gronk. I'm convinced that there is, that elbow brace has to be the same one that Gronk wore, and he just passed it down to the most unassuming guy, and it gave him powers, because it doesn't make any sense, because he's not super athletic. He still is stiff to me, but no one can tackle him, and he's always open. And he's got soft hands. Yes, he does run over people, and sometimes he
jumps over people.
Yeah, that was absurd. If I ever got jumped by Cade Stover, I'd probably hang up the cleats or ask to go play offense, because it's definitely my turn. So I've been really surprised by that. And then also, what I didn't see coming is the best player on defense being Lathan Ransom. And I know people are gonna think that's an overreaction, but I firmly I think he's better than Tommy. I think he's better than JT. I think he is the best, maybe defensive player in the entire Big Ten. What Lathan Ransom does and what they ask him to do,
he broke his leg in January.
Yeah, he broke his leg in January. Even go further than that, he broke his thumb.
Yeah.
First play of the game. And then he blocked a punt with the same hand. He's a guy with extreme toughness. He's the twitchiest and freakiest of the safeties. He's played nickel corner at a high clip. He's played the Ronnie Hickman role at times, and then he hasn't missed any tackles, which is why Ohio State hasn't given up any explosive long touchdowns this year while he's been out there. Lathan Ransom has really wowed me, and kind of the MVP of the defense. So that's kind of things I did not see coming. I always thought Lathan Ransom was really twitchy. I didn't know he was capable of being the best safety in the Big Ten, maybe in America.
Yeah, injuries definitely can be tough to predict, but Lathan, he might have played himself into a late first-round pick, might be gone after the end of the season, unfortunately. But kind of shifting gears to this weekend, a big question was going to be whether or not Ohio State and Michigan both might be looking ahead. And I mean, both teams did struggle a little bit, but I'm not so sure they were looking ahead as it was. Maryland and Illinois are just good teams that deserve their credit. And I mean, in Illinois' case, at least, they're still playing to get into the Big Ten championship game, and Maryland is playing the role of spoiler. So do you think it might have been a little bit of both, or maybe more on one side of that than the other?
I really think that, in Maryland's case, Ohio State is Team Super Bowl. So sometimes teams will get up for games. This Ohio State team, I don't know if they have one other than, Cade Stover might be. They don't have a vocal leader. So sometimes they get in cases where I think that they play down to competition and don't quite match opponents. We've seen it kind of throughout the year. For Illinois' case against Michigan, they're so similarly built, and they play such similar styles that I think it was kind of it's like two brothers fighting. It's this could go either way, and that's what that felt like. That's what it looked like. So I think that was more of a matchup thing. And then also with Ohio State is also an interesting thing matchup-wise too, because Maryland's a team that doesn't really run the ball that well, but the things that really have kind of showed itself in flashes against Ohio State has been mobile quarterbacks and then dynamic slot receivers. Raheem Jarrett is one of those guys, dynamic slot receiver, and Talia just did enough running around and did enough good stuff to really give Ohio State issues. I was kind of bugged by the corner play of Ohio State, playing 6 yards off, even though schematically it was just a different look. I didn't think was nice to see.
Chris, it was interesting to me, and I was watching this game, and I was talking with my dad too. My dad's a former football coach. He has this perspective as especially as a defensive coach that he was. He goes, "There's no sense, right? If you know this team, and I love what Maryland did. They said, okay, you're going to give us a 5 yard in, a 5 yard out, a 7 yard comeback." And so what the receivers do, they looked at them and said, okay, we'll give that. And especially with Burke, what frustrated me yesterday, and I'll be honest with you, Chris, what frustrated me yesterday was that Burke, he would run backwards for a yard. And I'm like, I get you're in cover 2 at times, but it's 3rd and 8 and you gave him 8 yards. And it's it's so frustrating.
Burke was given a lot of cushion.
It's frustrating because Knowles he's been great all year, but yesterday's game plan was a little weird for me. It was when we sent pressure and we got pressure, they couldn't do anything offensively. And then we stopped doing pressure and gave them a bunch of yards. And it's no, do what's getting you there. And what got you there was just pressure and forcing bad throws and making them run the ball, because when they had to run the ball, they couldn't run the ball. And so that's my thought process is you have to get the corners to go, look, you don't have to be always on them one-on-one, man up, but know you have help over the top. Know you have help inside, instead of giving them a 5 yard comeback that's going to end up being a first down every single time.
Yeah, it's like when you give a 6-yard cushion and Denzel Burke's first step is still a step backwards when it's 3rd and 4 is ridiculous. The only thing I can think of is like is Jim Knowles like playing this game where he's daring Maryland to pass and he's going to dial something up and kind of cloud lanes.
But he wasn't.
But then we never clouded lanes. We just no passing lanes were ever constricted the entire time. So it was frustrating to me. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, conspiracy theory. I'm like, okay, like I hope they're daring Michigan to pass, even though I know that's not how coaching works.
Well, it was also fascinating at the end of the game. I told David Cohn this, that on the podcast with Jeremy Birmingham and those guys, they interviewed Harrison at the end of the game. They said, hey, what made you go get 2 sacks when it was 3 rushing and you beat the tackle both times? And he goes, well, JT looked at me and said, hey, if you get a sack, the game's over. And then he's like, I went and got 2. Like that to me shows how much dog is in these Ohio State guys when they want to. Like, why can't this be every down? I don't understand. I also don't understand why. I love Johnson. I love him to death. Amazing coach, but we need to stop playing the 4th string line when it's in a key situation in the game. You need to play 2 deep at each position, and those are the rotations. You got to stop doing 4th string, because what happens when Ohio State gets beat running the ball? It's when they play their 4th string guys or the 3rd string guys. When they get beat passing with no pass rushers with their 3rd string guys. I know you want to get them experience, but at times you need your best guys out there as much as you can. And when JTT's out there, and when Harrison's out there, and when you have some of these guys inside that are out there, and you have Eichenberg blitzing up the middle, what they do, they blitz up the A gap, and there's no chance for them to do anything. And that's what they need to do more of. And I get so frustrated when they do these weird packages.
Yeah, they do the weird packages, and then what happens is as soon as teams see that, like, oh, if like JT's not out there, teams go tempo. It's like,
exactly.
Okay, he's not out there, we're going to keep him off the field. And it's like at that point you got to know, okay, like our let's put our very best out there, like critical down and distance or whatever. Let's make sure we are equipped to stop them and keep stopping them. So no, that's a really good point. And I love Harrison, and obviously Harrison also has the knee injury that he tweaked. This is crazy, like the amount of injuries that we're getting. But
Eichenberg played with 2 broken hands, by the way.
Yeah, Eichenberg with 2 broken hands. That's absurd. But no, you're right. I am intrigued to see how they come out against Michigan though as well. Like, are we going to see the cushion against Michigan? Are we going to dare Michigan to throw? Are we going to load? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like too, and I don't know, I haven't been around many coaches. I didn't play football, but I feel like just stack the box is such an armchair coach thing to do, because just stacking the box, it was that easy to stop the run. Don't you think every team would have done that to Michigan, made JJ beat them?
Yeah, they've been able to run the ball well against loaded fronts. Zach mentioned, I don't want to get too scheme heavy, but Zach has been sending me cut-ups from the coaches film, and one of the things that he referenced was that like kind of the way that Michigan combats that when they face loaded boxes is whenever they play a bare front. So that's a lot of times when you get a loaded box, they don't block one of the linebackers. And instead
I did hear him talk about this. Yep.
Yeah, so they don't block one of the linebackers, and they shoot another lineman to the outside. So it's like, okay, if you want to load this many in the box, we're going to run to the edge. We're going to leave somebody free, but we're also going to be running away from away from people. So it's not just a pure interior run game. So just something of note, they seal off the edge instead of blocking the linebacker, and then you force the linebacker to chase you, and it's like running around. So
it's I wish Ohio State would stop doing the outside run and just do what Josh has been saying the last few weeks and just run between the guard and the center like they should do every single time. But they don't do that, and it
seems to work more than when they do the stretch zone runs.
Well, the stretch zone, it's just like you're getting big like physical linemen running side to side instead of like
they're not athletic linemen. They're not as athletic as what you would like to do that.
Exactly.
You can't pull it. By the way, Matt Jones getting injured might have been a benefit to Ohio State going in, because he's been the one that's been injured all year. And my dad even goes, man, maybe that was a blessing because he's a guy that is, I think, was the weak link. Jackson was a little bit of a weak link as well. But I think with Jones, you saw yesterday, I mean, he got blown up by a 290-pound lineman that wasn't even a starting lineman yesterday. It's like, dude, you got to push back. You can't do this against Michigan.
He can't step. His ankle is so tight. Like, it looks like he has a high ankle sprain. And
it's a foot thing. They said it was a lower foot thing mixed with an ankle thing. It's like a combination of foot, ankle mixed.
And that makes sense. He's been struggling to plant that foot too.
No, they said he literally cannot step. Like he like that when that first step comes, then he has to immediately.
Like,
I don't know
why?
I have no. That is
it like, is he better than the next guy up? I don't know.
No, Enoch has been playing really well when he's in there, and that's why I don't get why you don't put Enoch in there. and who's been playing very well when he gets in there. And Dallin Hayden, by the way, this is what's crazy is Dallin Hayden, by the way, no one's talking about the fact this man has 300-yard rushing games when the dude was supposed to be the 4th string running back coming into the year, might get redshirted. And now this man and Xavier Johnson and Chip Trainum, they might be the feature guys.
Playoff front.
They might be the feature guys. It's like the 2014 run without the quarterback issues, but the running back issues. That's the fascinating part.
One of the things I do think is interesting as well, we have a chance right now to move DeJuan Jones back to guard. If you don't think Enoch is like that.
True.
Just for the record, that is something that should be in play with given how good was it Weipler played?
No, not Weipler.
Fryer. Excuse me.
Fryer,
yeah. Given how well Fryer played 2 weeks ago, so that'll be an option. They'll kind of evaluate that if they want.
That's a big guard. 6'8",
big guard. He played well at guard a couple of years ago. What was it, 2020? And he played some guard and opened up some stuff for Master Teague. And it was kind of like, all right, Master Teague, we know you don't have the best vision. Just follow 79. Just whatever you do, just follow 79 and match some things down. So they're gonna have to retool the offensive line. I don't think Matt Jones will play next week.
Hey, speaking of injuries and third stringers, Michigan's running back room might be, gutted for this Saturday with Blake Corum being hurt. Donovan Edwards also did not play in that game. I don't know what his health status is like. But I think it'd be a fair bet to say Michigan's run game would struggle without those guys. Meanwhile, we've just been talking about Dallin Hayden. Man has 3 100-yard games. He has answered every time that they have called his number. Could it possibly be that Ohio State has the edge in the running game this weekend, assuming that Corum and Edwards are both scratches again?
Definitely. Well, I mean,
I know Ohio State also has the issues at line that we've been talking about here, and they don't like to run it downfield as much as maybe they should. But I feel like that could be a lot more even if ends up being the case.
Here we go. I'm ready to finally have an honest discussion about TreVeyon Henderson.
Let's have it.
Oh boy,
TreVeyon Henderson is not a good enough running back to be the lead back for Ohio State. Dallin Hayden is. And I think that more people would be comfortable saying that if in the recruiting rankings, Dallin Hayden was a 5-star. People want to talk about Trey this, Trey that, injury this, injury that. Let's talk about Trey. Trey is only very productive when things are blocked perfectly up front. Trey is only good when you get him into space. And then Trey is suspect in pass pro. So for Dallin, things don't have to be blocked perfectly for him to give you 5 or 6. Dallin Hayden also in space shows that he can take these creases and score. Dallin Hayden has better footwork, better balance, better vision, and he's well coached. On pass pro, he's punishing guys more than Trey is. So again, it's like if Dallin Hayden came in as a 5-star, as touted as all everything, he would be like the guy. There'd be no debate or any talking from any fans about anything. With Trey, it's like you want to hold on to he's more talented. When he's in space. This and that. Dallin Hayden is forcing more missed tackles per touch than TreVeyon Henderson. It's like, okay, so he's got that edge. So it's like, well, what about when they both are in open field? Well, in terms of percentage of ripping off over 10-yard runs, Dallin's better at that as well. And then it's like, Trey's foot is hurt. Well, Trey's foot's been hurt all year. That doesn't affect vision. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, mine's been hurt all year as well. His vision has been there. So for me, I think I am comfortable. And the one thing I worried about was like, okay, workload, is he going to fumble? Dallin Hayden hasn't put the ball on the ground once. I mean, Zach talked to me a little bit about how well coached Dallin is. He does everything that Tony asks him to do. And at this point, it's like, I know he's a true freshman, but we gave a true freshman the ball last year to tote the load, and it was TreVeyon Henderson. And we had no problems with that, mainly because he was a 5-star. So once you get to Ohio State, they say that the stars and all that are gone. So you take the stars and everything away, and I think Dallin should be the feature back for this team. And that's crazy at this point because it is Ohio State, but he deserves, for every touch that Trey gets, Dallin should have at least 3. So that's where I'm at in terms of the running back room with them moving forward.
The man said it. No, I think those 5-stars are important. I mean, I think Ohio State's even had maybe the same thing happen with Fleming, right? I mean, that 5-star, the top receiver in his class, and they've been hoping that he finally would reach that potential. And I think this just might be as good as Fleming's going to get.
Yeah, exactly. And Trey runs like Trey runs like a meathead, man. like he doesn't even try to use any kind of vision. It's like, if it's not right in front of me, I'm going to take a sharp left and go outside. I'm just going to sprint as fast as I can. He's not following any creases, and it's making it look like the offensive line is not doing that good of a job blocking. But I mean, we're drawing it up, and for some, like when Dallin's in there, the holes are there. When Trey's in there, the holes are there. But like, it just looks different and feels different.
Yeah, and I think too, you look at Xavier Johnson. I mean, he had one carry and he took it 70 yards of the house. Why? Because the hole was there. And by the way, this is what I want to say too, is you look at Dallin Hayden, and I know he's not the same back as Trey Sermon and Ezekiel Elliott. I know he's not the same backs as them. But when you watch him run, when he was in the power I and they had Rossi out there at fullback at the H-back, and they did that handoff when he took, I think, like 15 yards. And I watched him and I go, I pulled up a highlight of Ezekiel Elliott. I pulled a highlight of Trey Sermon. I go, that's that guy. Like, this is who he is. And I would not be shocked is, let's say mine goes pro after this year. There will be a huge competition next year for who that guy is. Plus, Ohio State needs to get another running back in the.
Yeah, I think Braylon Allen's going to hit the portal from Wisconsin.
Yeah. So let's say you have Braylon Allen. Let's say you get Braylon Allen to come. You have those three guys. What are you going to do? You're going to have basically three guys that can run for 1,000 yards. And I'll say this: people are like, "Well, Trayvion's better in the pass game." I'm like, "Yeah, but he had two. But Dallin had 2 catches for 20 yards yesterday. Like, when he needs to get the ball, he gets the ball." And Zeke Elliott was never a great pass catcher. He just did when he needed to. Same with Trey Sermon. Was never a great pass catcher. What I love about Dallin Hayden is he's like, I'm a freshman. I don't care. Oh, you're going to stick in front of me. I want to run you over. Oh, you're going to get in front of me. I want to juke you out. Oh, you're going to give me not getting me that hole. I'm going to bounce it, not outside. I'm going to bounce it inside to another gap. And that's what I'm going to do.
It's interesting. You kind of brought all those things up. They all feel like guys that are coached by Tony Alford.
Yes.
Like they do all like the little things, the little coach tool things. It's like, oh, like he took to Tony's coaching so well, and I see it too. Like just the little stuff and the way they get skinny through the hole. Always moving forward. Take the 4 that's there. You don't need 30 every time. So I mean, and the fact that it's great. Dallin Hayden is a more mature runner than Travion Henderson. That should not be the case for a true freshman.
No. Who has worse vision, Kris, Trent Richardson or Travion Henderson?
Trent Richardson. It's not even close. Trent Richardson was awful, and I'm a Browns fan. It's very evident.
Trent Richardson, they said he struggled walking through a door. Like when he came into the when he went to Berea during camp, they said he walked through the side of the door a couple times. So I don't know what's going on with him.
Yeah, I just had to ask that since you brought up the vision. But hey, man, let's talk Ohio State's offense as a whole now. In comparison to Michigan's D. Michigan had all like the seniors graduate last year, right? Like no more Aiden Hutchinson, no more David Ojabo, no more Daxton Hill, no more Josh Ross. And still Michigan's defense is first in total defense, second in scoring defense. And they actually have just about as many sacks as they did last year, losing 2 like first round prospects at the edge. Yeah. So I think that might be the biggest surprise heading into this game is how good Michigan's defense still is. How do you think Ohio State's offense matches up with them?
Mozzie Smith terrifies me. I do worry about our interior offensive line play, and Mozzie Smith is the freakiest defensive tackle in all of college football, not named Jalen Carter. And he's an issue. So I think they will try to run away from him. So I'm just preparing Buckeye fans to see a lot of stretch because
stretch zone. Oh, we love that stretch zone run in Columbus, don't we, Ben?
Because you want to run away from Mozzie Smith.
Yeah.
I do think we're going to see a lot of wide receiver screens. So Buckeye Nation, prepare yourself for those as well.
So you mean, wait, Kris, you mean we're going to have a wide receiver screen on the first play like we do every single game except this last game? Every game we have the first play of the game.
They might run a go route on the first play of the game. They might run a fake wide receiver screen and just try to do a wheel. But Michigan's corners can't hold our receivers. And that's what it's going to be about.
I think that's definitely a mismatch.
Yeah, that is a sizable mismatch in my opinion. And that's why it's like you need Fleming and Emeka to do well because Harrison's going to get cloud coverage most of the game, which is kind of what happened last game. Like at first Maryland was like, all right, we're just going to press man. And then they saw that kind of game, like, play one. It's like, okay, inside release, I'm going to go outside and get you. And there it is. So I do think you're going to have to see big games from Fleming and Emeka. And then also a lot of stretch run as well. They're going to run away from Mozzie Smith to tire him out. But in the second half, they could run at him because he is a guy that struggled with his conditioning this season.
Yeah, I know you can't always use the transitive property in college football just because, like, sometimes you end up in circles with, like, these teams that have beaten each other. But, I mean, the best passing offense Michigan has probably faced has been Maryland. And that was also one of Michigan's closest games that they had this season. So I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you got to be thinking, man, if Talia can do that against Michigan D, imagine what CJ can do on his home field with Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Cade Stover.
Exactly. Well, even what David Cohn, so those of you are obviously still listening, so you heard David Cohn's interview. He did say, Josh, and you remember this, he said that the one thing that has, when Michigan has lost to Ohio State or lost the big games, it was their secondary that really cost them on the defensive side of the ball.
The explosive plays,
yes,
not even just with the secondary, but with like guys like Zeke and Beanie Wells getting the big runs too. Explosive plays is something that this Ohio State team is very capable of.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where, Chris, you can probably touch on this. I know you and Zach probably have talked about this, but the thing is the one thing that I am a little worried about, and I've said this the last few weeks, this week wasn't as bad as what it was, but the fact that Marvin Harrison Jr. was getting over 50% of the catches or the completions for CJ Stroud, when Emeka Egbuka basically disappeared for a few games.
Yeah, he vanished.
And the same with Fleming was dropping the ball left and right. Farmer Gronk was about the only other guy that was really catching the ball. And I think for me, what does worry me is just that if Harrison's locked up, will someone step up? Because I know they can, and I know they're talented enough. This past week was a good evidence of that. We saw some guys step up, but Marvin Harrison is a freak, and they're going to probably double him. Show. They're probably going to at least man-to-man. They'll probably have a double on him or a guy over top. Will baby Gronk step up? Will Egbuka, will Fleming, I would love to see Jaden Ballard get in there and see if he can do something, or, Bab or whoever. But my question is for you is, do you think that we're going to have enough outside of Harrison to keep this game from not being one-dimensional, even more one-dimensional than it could already be?
I think Emeka has the clutch gene. I think there's been times where he's gone away for a majority of the game, but like when it's time, when he's needed, makes a big play. Obviously, against Penn State, had the huge play. I'm kind of late in that game. He made a couple really critical third down catches against Maryland. Like, he's a guy that seems to elevate a little bit. It means a little bit more to him. So I think that'll be a guy that in the slot could see a lot more work. I do know also that there's been a lot of talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. and some slot packages as well to try to clear out some of that cloud coverage. So they think that he's a gifted enough route runner. So kind of one of the wrinkles we could see is not too much of a wrinkle, more of we think Marvin Harrison Jr. is such a good route runner that we feel comfortable putting him in the slot and putting more players in conflict to force more one-on-one stuff for Emeka.
Do you think that Smith and Jigba plays in this game, or do you think he is done and he's just going to look at the draft?
Hearing that Ohio State likes Marv in the slot makes me think that they are preparing for Emeka for JSN to be done. But there is kind of an inkling. I do know his brother came and visited him and spent time with him. I do know that he's, has an itch and wants to win a national title. That's something that's kind of on his mind. Obviously, he was on that 2020 team that made it to the Natty and got absolutely boat raced. And on the other side of that game was Jalen Waddle, who broke his ankle week 2 for Alabama, and then he waited all the way through and came back late in the year. He's still enrolled in classes, so it makes me think that he's not quite, packing it up entirely. And he only took one visit to Florida to go see Dr. James Andrews to kind of get, some more opinions on that hamstring. I don't know if he plays against Michigan, but I think we could see him in the postseason run if he wants to, because he hasn't shut it down yet. Even though if I were him, I probably would have.
Let's move over to the Michigan offense now. Let's assume that we have a healthy Blake and a healthy Donovan running the football. The way that Michigan runs the football, as you said, they kind of leave that linebacker open. So this is going to be an important game for Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg. I think that they are both talented enough that they're going to be able to, I guess, get through that gap and maybe hit them a little bit earlier. Maybe Michigan's not getting, those 6-7 yard chunks. Maybe it ends up being more like 3 or 4, especially if they're playing like another backup Michigan running back. Talk to me about that matchup, how maybe those linebackers could perform, and then talk to me about, I guess, how you feel about Burke and Cam Brown lining up on Roman Wilson and Ronnie Bell.
Oh, boy.
So here you go. Fun fact for you. Ronnie Bell has more drops in the year than Julian Fleming. So hold on to that. Take that for what it's worth.
Dropped it. Hang on, Chris. I'm sorry, guys.
That was bad.
Beautiful.
That was bad.
No, I'm here for it. That was good. What else is good? Ronnie Hickman's good. I think this is going to be the Ronnie Hickman in the backfield game because we play traditionally with 2 linebackers, and kind of Ronnie Hickman acts as that third linebacker, but also like really good at coverage. Kind of that's the Jim Knowles safety thing. They don't like to run 3 linebackers out there. We saw it. It happened one time, and EA got picked on in the touchdown in the back of the end zone against Maryland. It's going to be nice to see Tommy Eichenberg downhill for an entire game.
With 2 broken hands.
Yeah, 2 broken hands down over the entire game. They'll block 2 of the 3 run support guys. So it'll either be my guess. I think they would probably block Tommy and Steele, but they're still going to leave that third guy who's a linebacker, basically. And Ronnie Hickman unblocked. So I think this could be the game for him. And if they choose to block Ronnie and Steele, then it's going to be Tommy Eichenberg coming downhill unblocked the entire game. And I'm not sure why they would do that. I do think it's interesting because I think that Jim Knowles doesn't trust J.J. McCarthy at all to throw the ball. And so I think that they're going to kind of load up and dare JJ to hit his layups. And he missed some layups against Illinois, like some really bad layups he missed. But additionally, like for all the issues we've had at corner, it's not like Michigan's been really good kind of in the throw game. So what I'm kind of interested to see is like how many shots will Michigan take, especially with the way Andrew Anthony's kind of been, struggling lately. And then how many shots will they take at Tanner McAllister? That's the weakness. Tanner McAllister in the slot has had such a tough time with slot receivers all year. Obviously, Maryland slot receivers cooked him. Washington from Penn State had over 100 yards on Tanner McAllister. Like this entire season, it's been McAllister against slot guys. Who's Michigan's slot receiver? It's the leading receiver. It's Ronnie Bell. And that's like in close proximity to the quarterback. That's usually the easy access throw. So Tanner McAllister is going to have to step it up, or else this could end up being we could enter odd territory with the Michigan offense versus Ohio State defense.
Yeah, I think Illinois, I mean, you mentioned that they kind of are the same team as in Michigan, but they really kind of laid out a nice little blueprint on how you can stop Michigan is play that tight man coverage, force JJ to beat you. I know Michigan still came out with the win, but this was the first time Michigan has been in a situation where it's like, oh, shoot, we don't have Blake or Donovan. JJ, you have to win us this game. And I don't know if he necessarily did. I mean, I know he got him at least in field goal range. Moody was able to make some kicks, but right now, if you're Michigan, I don't believe JJ McCarthy can win you a game yet. And this might be one of those games that he has to do that, actually.
Yeah, he missed a bad layup that would have put the game away, I think. Yeah. Like the tight end throw. And I had the exact same throw from CJ Stroud completing it against Maryland like 3 hours later. So, he misses some bad throws. And if you're Jim Knowles, you want to heat him up and make sure you wrap up on the first time instead of letting him kind of scramble around back there, because that's really the weakness of the Ohio State defense. Like if quarterbacks are able to survive that initial blitz, kind of run around a little bit like we saw Talia do, you could run into some issues. But I don't think JJ can beat Ohio State with his arm, so it's going to have to be run game oriented.
Ben, you have any other matchup or stat you want to talk about before we get into some listener questions?
Yeah. DJ Turner versus Marvin Harrison Jr. That is the one. That is the matchup.
That is the matchup, but there's another matchup that I think will be very interesting. I want to hear Chris' thoughts on is who do you believe is more clutch? No Ruggles or Moody? Who do you believe in more to make that key clutch kick when it comes down to the end of the game? Because let's be honest, that might be what it comes down to. And who do you believe in more that could be more clutch? Because we've never seen Ruggles hit beyond 47. We know Moody can. That's what scares me as a Ohio State fan. Is like Ruggles is great from 20 to 40 yards, but after that, he can be a wild card for that.
Moody's a better kicker.
Yeah.
To me,
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I'd take Moody if it comes down to kicking. But
Moody's a better kicker. Noah has more swag. That's what it is.
We have the best, the best punter in the game. I believe Jesse Mirko is the best punter, but that's just my opinion.
Jesse's nasty. I love Jesse too, but no, I love them both, but Noah's not the same kicker as he is. So
yeah. All right, listener questions, Josh.
All right, so we'll start off with this one, Chris. The Heisman race has been kind of tight. Does an Ohio State win guarantee CJ the Heisman? And if Blake Corum has a solid day, Michigan wins, does that guarantee the Heisman for him?
I think CJ Stroud is a lock to win the Heisman no matter what his numbers are if they win on Saturday. I think if Corum goes over 150 or if Corum goes over 100 with 2 tutties and they win, he wins the Heisman. I think that's how wide open it is at this point.
That was interesting. Yeah, we talked to David about this. He mentioned that he kind of has a hard time going with CJ at Heisman, mostly because he's not having as good of a season as he did last year with all the touchdowns and the yards. Like, he's having a worse season this year. But to me, the thing about CJ too is when he's had his bad games, everyone else in the field has kind of had a bad game as well. Like, we just seen Hendon Hooker struggle against South Carolina. He's injured now. Blake ends up going down. Still has 100 yards, but out nonetheless. Who else? Drake May finally swagged out against Georgia Tech. So it's like, okay, every time CJ maybe hasn't had the best game, everyone else in the field has kind of been the same situation, I guess. And then, I mean, even Bryce Young last year didn't necessarily run away with it. He just kind of won by default, I feel like. And I feel like CJ might be in the lead by default right now as well.
Yeah, CJ's going to win it by default. I mean, last year, CJ had a game where what was it, against Tulane or Tulsa or whatever, he threw for 136 yards and 1 touchdown, 2 picks, like something like that, and he was still the leader going into that final week. I mean, because there's been no otherworldly performances out there, and you know, of the top, it's like an MVP award. It's like, so usually like the best player on the best team wins it unless someone else is having like an astronomical season. So like Stetson Bennett like isn't going to win it. He's like not the best player. David Cohn
believes Williams is his top runner right now. So that's what he believes, that it could be the guy that pulls it out. But he also then did say, as I told you before the show started, that he also believes, though, it's going to be really hard for the voters to vote for him because he does play on the West Coast. And it's going to be very hard for voters to vote for him when CJ Stroud is playing in every single primetime game.
I watched Christian McCaffrey have the greatest season a running back has had in modern, football history.
Yeah, I mean, set the record for all-purpose yards, I believe.
Exactly, and I don't think he finished top 2 in the Heisman, and that was a good team. So I think the West is dead in terms of the Heisman.
West is dead, but I feel like if anyone from the West is going to win a Heisman, it's going to be somebody from USC, and we've seen that from Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. And the other thing about Caleb too, he's got his best games ahead of him. Like, he just had the UCLA game. Now he's going to play Notre Dame. And then he's also probably going to play Oregon for that Pac-12 championship. So he still has a couple games that he could put himself, at least put together a better case. But even with like Hendon Hooker, he doesn't have like the total numbers, but he has the efficiency, was leading one of the highest scoring offenses in the country. But now that Tennessee's got 2 losses, that narrative's kind of dead. Drake May, I mean, big numbers, the freshman. He already didn't have an undefeated team, but I mean, bad loss to Georgia Tech. I mean, you can't lose bad like that. And it was kind of on him a little bit too. So I think that hurts his case a little bit. Bo Nix, I mean, has a lot of total touchdowns. Max Duggan's quarterback in an undefeated TCU team. So I think they might be kind of on the outside looking in. And then Blake too. I mean, if he can finish with an undefeated season, being around like the top 5 of rushing touchdowns and yards, I think that's a case for him as well.
Yeah, the Heisman's at least it's become about who can avoid the black eyes. And it's like, oh, like Hendon Hooker has the black eye delivered by Spencer Rattler. Like that's a bad black eye.
Who saw that coming, man?
Yeah.
Spencer Rattler.
Spencer, it's crazy. Like Bo Nix has the black eye. Like everyone has the black eye except for, CJ Stroud and Blake Corum at this point. And then Caleb Williams, I would say, doesn't have the black eye because that loss wasn't all on him and he did play really well, kind of since then. So, yeah, I mean, I think New York is going to be CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, and then either Max or Blake, depending on if Blake plays this last week.
Good stuff. Another question that we had escapes me at the moment.
Well, it was basically if whoever wins this game, does the loser, depending on how things fall around, does the loser also make the college football playoff?
Can both of these teams still be in the playoff?
Michigan in a close loss would still be in. Ohio State in a close loss would be trickier because they are the home team and the favorite. So I think it's shaping up. I think because of how Tennessee lost, I think that if Michigan loses close, they will be the number 4 team in the country, and if TCU wins out, they'll be the number 3 team in the country. The trickier thing happens if LSU manages to beat.
Right.
That's
the one thing I think that could keep this from happening, because Tennessee now 2 losses, no conference championship game appearance. I'd say they're done. North Carolina now has 2 losses, potentially 3 if they can't get by Clemson. I'd say they're out of it. Clemson still kind of in it if they can win that ACC. TCU still undefeated, can win the Big 12. That USC still is in it, but I don't think that a 2-loss Oregon is going to get in if they end up winning it. So the field really did shrink this week. And I think the only thing that could keep both Ohio State and Michigan from both making it is if this game is more than 2 scores and if LSU beats Georgia in that SEC championship game.
Yeah, blowout fashion, eliminate somebody. So
yeah,
that's
hey, I agree, and I think I really believe that it would be awesome. And I said this to one of my friends. I said, wouldn't it be cool if Ohio State went in at 2, Michigan at 4, and the national title was the game 2.0?
That'd be nuts. We almost had it in 06. That'd be super crazy to see.
It would be awesome to watch, and it would be an amazing event. It'd be watching the Ohio State Michigan game twice in the same year would be unreal and just be awesome. I would love it. I really would.
It too. 2 pairs of gold pants. Want to get our lick back from last year.
Absolutely.
There you go. All right. Well, let's talk some score predictions, Ben.
Oh boy.
So we'll give Kris ours first. We shared them with David. I'm kind of with Ohio State being the home team. I think that's going to ultimately be the factor here. I got Ohio State winning 37-34. I think that both defenses will get their fair stops. I think both kickers will get their fair share of field goals in this one. This is also assuming that at least Blake or Donovan play one of the two. So I got Ohio State winning 37-34. Ben has Ohio State winning by I believe by a much larger margin.
Yes, I have Ohio State winning 38-28, and I believe it's going to come down to, I believe, that fourth quarter. I think it's going to be a tight ball game throughout the first half, and even part of that third quarter. But I do think C.J. Stroud ultimately will have to be that X factor. Him and Marvin Harrison, I think, will have a big game. And I think that defense is going to come up big, and I wouldn't be shocked if you see a couple strip sacks or something at the end of that game that separates. So I have Ohio State winning 38-28.
I don't think Corum's going to play next week. So if Corum and Edwards don't play, I have 48-24.
Oh,
I have a double up. I just think they're I don't think they're very good without those two. And seeing Donovan Edwards in a cast, I know he said he could have played if they needed him, but they needed him. Like this,
they needed him and he didn't go in the game.
Yeah, it's like this is one where we knew it was going to be a dogfight and he didn't go. So I think we double him up, especially after how last year went, and also like I'm a believer that like Ryan Day becomes Thanos in get back games. I saw him call his very best game as a play caller against Clemson. In 2020, like the get back game that shouldn't have been a blowout and was. So I have a ton of respect for what Michigan's done this year. I don't think they can do it. I mean, the way that Blake Corum went down and like the way he was
holding his knee and he dropped the ball and holding his knee.
Yeah, like that's not a I took a shoulder pad to the knee injury. That's a like something tweaked out and it hurts really badly, and that's not a 1 week fix. So I got 48-24. I got a blowout.
That is
with your blowout win, Kris. Is it tied up 24-24 going into the fourth, and Ohio State just has an explosive fourth?
Yeah, I do think it's one of those the games that Ohio State pulls away in the kind of the back half of the third quarter. Excuse me. I think it's one of those. I think it's like Michigan can't keep pace.
These are actually the two highest scoring second half teams in the country. So I think it's very important for neither team to fall behind too far in that first half. And then in the second half, it's like you got to be on it.
Well,
third Corey, Steph Curry.
Even David was like, it was so shocking. As a Ohio State fan, you're down yesterday. You're only up 3, and he goes, it's crazy. I look up and they're back up. They win by double digits once again. And he goes, this Ohio State team. David Cohn even said, like, this Ohio State team, it can score in bunches and fast. And if you're Michigan, you cannot be behind the 8 ball, because Michigan, when they're their best, is when they're ahead of the game. They're up ahead, because when they get behind, we haven't seen them, as David said. And can McCarthy win you a game when you have to throw the ball and you can't run the ball? I don't know. We do not know. We know Stroud can. We know Stroud can come from behind and make the Utah game and many other games that he's done that.
No, I agree. And also like Ohio State, they've been able to kind of weather quarterbacks playing out of their mind. Like now at this point, 2 quarterbacks have played out of their mind against Ohio State, like Talia and Sean Clifford. And it's been like, okay, like they've taken other teams' best shot from their best quarterback with better skill players and, a more explosive offense, and been able to kind of respond and bounce back. So, I think it'll be a really hard fought game, really, really toughness game. But I just don't think Michigan's going to be able to bleed out many possessions, because I think they're going to be down early. So it's going to be a tight game early. So that's where I'm at. 40. Yeah. Yep. Go Bucks.
What would you say? I think before we finish up here, what would you say? We'll go around here. Your X factor for Ohio State victory, since we all chose Ohio State. What is your X factor for the Ohio State victory? Kris, go ahead and start.
Julian Fleming's hands.
That's the X factor.
Like Julian's hands. Like he's had long touchdowns, or chance at long touchdowns in every game this year if he catches the ball.
Yeah.
So Julian's hands. I mean, he could really be the one that blows this game open. And traditionally, Ohio State versus Michigan, there's been a freshman receiver that kind of blows the doors off of this. Remember Garrett Wilson, in 2019, like went Super Saiyan. Obviously, we know about Chris Olave went absurd that year. JSN had a presence even though he wasn't a true freshman. And it's like, can a guy leave a mark on a game? And it's going to be Julian. It's going to have to be Julian Fleming, or Cameron Babb, which would be incredible for me. But I don't see it happening. So.
Josh, what about you?
I'm going to go ahead and say that my X factors, I'll give you one on offense and defense for both sides. I'm going to go with Dallin Hayden just because we've seen him do it against Maryland. Now let's see him do it against a really tough run defense that Michigan's got. So I'm kind of going with it that, CJ's a given, Marv's a given, Egbuka can be a given if they use him right. But Dallin Hayden, I like him better than Trey, like we said, but I don't know if he's necessarily the given. So I'm going to go with Dallin Hayden, X factor on offense. And I'm going to go ahead and say, after hearing Kris talk about that defense, Ronnie Hickman, X factor on the defense for Ohio State. Can he clog up those holes, be that guy that gets through that gap and stops whoever's running the ball for Michigan? Then on the Michigan side, I think it's obvious the X factor for Michigan's got to be JJ McCarthy. He hasn't been put in a position where he has to be the guy to win a game and win it. So we got to see that from him. We got to see him hit those, those slant routes. We got to see him hit the deep ball. We got to see him, compensate for what could be lacking in the run game. And then on defense, I'm going to go ahead and say, what was the kid's name? Moore, the corner that's going to be covering Marv.
Oh, DJ Turner?
Turner. That's it. Yeah. DJ Turner. I'm going to go ahead and say he's the X factor. If you can take Marv out of the game or even hold him to like 5 catches, I think that's huge for Michigan's defense.
Huge.
Yeah. I have a few things here, but I think one for me, the X factor on defense for Ohio State is cornerback number 2. Who's going to step up? Who's going to be that guy? We know Cameron Brown, what he can do when he's healthy. He's one of the best corners out there. Who's going to be? Is it Burke? Is it Jair? Is it
Hancock? I thought Hancock was so bad. Yes. He was so bad.
And Hancock was bad.
And this is my thing. You have to have a corner number 2 because you might be able to shut down. We've seen it with the Browns this year, right? You shut down, you can, and it's this way in football in general. You go after the weakest link, and we know that if you're going to throw the ball, you're going to go after the weakest link on the secondary. So my X factor is whoever's that corner number 2. We saw Denzel Burke last year. Will we ever see that again? I don't know. But what I do know is that we know that Knowles will try the best he can to help out those corners if need be, guy over the top or whatever. But that's my X factor for the defense. That corner number 2 needs to step up. My X factor on offense is who is playing at right guard. That's my X factor because you know what's going to happen. If let's say it's Enoch or it's one of these backup guys, or even DeJuan Jones moves down or whatever, you know they're going to put their best defensive tackle, who is
Mozzie
Smith, who that's what's going to happen. And so my thing is if it's Enoch or if it's somebody else, are you willing to say, screw what I've been having to do with the second string? I'm going to just put everything I got here. I don't care if I overrun or I get, some of these, I miss a block because I'm just I would rather you overrun and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So that's my X factor on the offensive side of the ball is who is going to be at right guard. And that is a very key thing. And then for Michigan, I think the big X factor really is, I think the offense and defensive line for Michigan, if they can control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, then I think this game could be a totally different mindset of what we think it's going to go. Because let's say Ohio State's defense gets pushed back and they start getting 6, 7, 8, 9 yards of carry, then that starts opening up a lot of things that make it very scary for Ohio State. Then my X factor, my other X factor for Michigan would be their secondary. Can they keep up with Marv? Can they keep up with Egbuka? Can they keep up with Stover? Can they keep up with this? I mean, I can keep going on and on and on, right? If they can do that and you can slow down Stroud, we've seen what happens when Stroud's slowed down. You rely on the run game, which at times the run game hasn't been as reliable.
It's been stifled, right?
That's the thing. Will the secondary of Michigan show up? So those are my X factors. And I guess I throw an honorable mention to Noah Ruggles. Don't miss an extra point, and please make the short field goals if you can.
Yeah, no blocks, please.
That block was insane, man.
Yeah. I want to add to your point about corners.
Yes.
Can they tackle as well? Because last year Michigan ran at them a lot because Denzel Burke did not want to tackle, and that's going to be a big part.
That is true, and it is going to be a heck of a game. And I think all of us sitting here, I know David as well, we're all going to be tuned in. I think everyone around the country is going to be tuned in. Heck, you have Game Day and Fox Noon are both going to be there, which is crazy. It's going to be a nuts atmosphere. I have friends going to the game. I can't wait to see it. I know for you guys listening, this is coming out, early in the week here. please let us know in your comments. What's your score predictions? What do you think is going to happen? Give us some questions to talk about. I know Josh and I will brief it after the game, obviously in the next week's episode. But first off, we want to say to Kris, thank you so much for hopping on and joining us. I know Josh and I appreciate it anytime you come on. You've actually tied both my brother and who else was it? Is it just my brother? And Bryce, right?
Bryce got on a third time. Jared got on a third time.
Yeah.
This is Chris's third time.
So you've tied for the third for the lead in most appearances on the baseline.
Tied for the lead. Well, I'm ready to break the record.
Hey,
I'm ready to take the lead.
Hey, we will have you on anytime. You know that, my man. And we appreciate you, man. Thank you for taking the time to just join us and hanging out with us.
No, this is awesome. I appreciate you boys.
Hey, we love you, man. And make sure you guys check out all of the Menace2Sports. Menace2Sports. Yeah, I said that right.
Mm-hmm.
But go ahead, before we go, Kris, go ahead and let us know what's going on and where they can catch you guys.
Oh, yeah. Catch us on YouTube every single weekday live at 12. Menace2Sports. It's a YouTube channel. Zach and I do a show every single day. It's a little bit nuts. It's a little bit tough to do, but we're really excited to do it. And then also, we'll probably put out like 3 or 4 extra pieces of content, whether that's on Twitter. Our Twitter's Menace2Sports as well. So it's all pretty uniform. And yeah, just kind of hanging out and talking rivalry stuff. Obviously, it's really cool because Zach's been a part of the rivalry himself and seen a lot of the madness. So, yeah, come check us out every single weekday at noon. We're live, but that episode does get posted on Spotify and on iTunes.
Hey, it's awesome. We can't wait to have you back. So, yeah, thanks for stopping by. Josh, any last final words for good old Kris?
Man, yeah. I always love talking to Kris, man. He's like one of the guys. He's got the fan takes. He's been to spaces, so he knows maybe a little bit more that could be unofficial or official. But yeah, always appreciate having you on, man, and what you bring to the table.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Josh.
Hey, appreciate you, man. Hey, we will, everyone just let us know who's better looking, Kris or Zach Smith. That's the question. Who's better looking? Let us know in the comments for sure. But yeah, thank you so much, Kris, and we'll catch you next time.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, there you have it. Kris Drew has dropped some great knowledge and dropped the mic. You can get that from the joke that Josh said in that little interview. But he dropped the mic with some great knowledge, some great insight. Obviously, him and Zach do a great job over there at Menace2Sports. You can check all their stuff out. I'm sure I've dropped it in the link below or wherever it goes. You guys know where to find them. But I really enjoyed hearing from Kris, and his perspective is always just so fascinating how he thinks and goes through things. But Josh, what do you think of how you thought of Kris?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up, I guess, the way that Michigan runs the football, right? Like how they leave, I guess, that one extra man free to come through if they want. It hasn't been done yet. So that was one nugget that I picked up from Kris. And just, I guess, doing a show with a former college football coach like Zach Smith also kind of helps him out a little bit of that. So some of that rubs off on Kris, and we get a little bit of that action as well.
Yeah, it is quite fascinating. And I think he's done I think Kris did a great job of explaining like the little details that we kind of miss, or the matchups that we kind of miss, the unknown facts that we kind of just oversee if we're a normal fan watching. And as much as we try to see everything, it seems like Kris has always seen everything and Zach always sees everything. So it was awesome. I love
Kris is not short of hot takes too, and hills either to die on. I mean, who else in the comments, like drop in the comments, would you rather have Dallin Hayden or Travion Henderson as your running back this I guess for the game, and then like next season, who would you rather have?
That was shocking.
I think that rating really is messing with some people, man.
Yeah,
we haven't seen enough of Dallin Hayden, I guess, in meaningful games. So I guess we'll get that first taste at it. But I mean, Maryland was winning the game at half, were they not? And then Dallin Hayden just explodes in the second half. They make that change, take Travion off the field, and Dallin plays, a big key in Ohio State's comeback victory.
Yeah, it was that was a very hot take, but I'm not surprised. It's Kris Drew. But no, we really appreciate Kris coming on. And also, Josh, thought I would note that while we've been recording this, the Browns lost again. But that just seems to be a normal pattern for us. But I just thought I would throw that in passing. But if you would like to know our Heisman rankings, our power rankings, just so you know, there's gonna be a bone. Actually, there's technically 2 guests on that this week. We're not dropping them here on the show. Head on over to our @baseline.podcast where you'll be able to see those. It'll be Josh and I, as well as David and Kris. They will have dropped theirs with this as well, and you'll be able to check out and disagree, agree. You can comment. You can tell how bad mine is, because it's usually mine's pretty much the same every week now. But you can check those out, and let us know what you thought, your thoughts, and anything like that. Josh, do you have any final thoughts for this great episode of the 66th episode of the Baseline Podcast?
Yeah, so this week, a lot of people are gathering with friends and family for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys are even listening to this episode with some of those people as well right now. I'm going to steal this line from Josh Pate. I want you to steal your grandma's phone, your grandpa's phone, your sister-in-law's phone, anyone's phone that you can, and go to the Baseline on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a rating, subscribe, boost our numbers, take advantage of this moment, help the Baseline grow. We'd really appreciate that. But I like that line from Pate. I'm going to go ahead and ask our Baseline following to do the same.
Hey, I am so down for that. I agree. Find those people that you are around, that encourage people to listen. Like, drop this episode. Like, this is our biggest episode production wise. Putting together, getting two guests at the same time in the same frame, and putting it all together. So please, this episode is really what we're trying to do, which is try to bring family friendly fun to sports, and to talk about sports, and just to have a great time, like a conversation like you're at Thanksgiving. So please go check us out. It'll be a great time. If you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, notification bell. That way you'll see all the new episodes coming out, and all the new details we might be dropping, maybe new clips and stuff that'll be on YouTube. And then if you're listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're favoring it. Make sure you share it with your friends and family on Facebook or Instagram or wherever. And that way we can see what people are saying and commenting and everything like that. So once again, we want to say happy Thanksgiving from the Baseline Podcast. We hope you guys have a great time with family, watching some football, watching some soccer. It's World Cup time. World Cup matches have already started.
True.
So have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy Black Friday. Don't get trampled. And we'll see you guys next week. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Until next time, we'll see ya.